The U.S. soccer program is broken. We've been hearing this statement for years, but it rings true now more than ever. With the men's team missing the Olympics in 2016 and the World Cup in 2018. Both of these failures illustrated the problems that have pervaded the U.S. soccer system for years. We know now that the men's team doesn't have the talent to compete on the world stage, and they will continue to struggle as long as certain problems persist within the system. Additionally, if we continue down this path, the women's team will lose its competitive advantage over the rest of the world. The women's team won't be able to beat up on other countries in the World Cup for much longer anyways, but keeping the soccer system as it is will reduce the women's team's advantage much quicker. Today, I'm going to explain why the US is struggling to field a competitive men's team, why the women's team won't be this good forever, and how we can fix these problems, so that we are not left watching countries with half the population of Alaska succeed at the World Cup while our team sits at home. The problems with the soccer system can be whittled down to three big issues. The US has a problem with soccer culture, the pay-to-play system, and player development. Each of these also interlock with each other, so some things within the pay-to-play system also affect player development, and so on. The US doesn't care about soccer as much as they care about sports. That's it. No, but seriously. Even though soccer has been around for centuries, the US doesn't have the rabid fandom or the serious interest in soccer as they do for American football, baseball, or basketball. I'm not sure there's a simple reason for this, but there are some that were mentioned more in my research that I'm going to delve into. For one thing, the US doesn't have an elite soccer league on their home soil. The MLS doesn't count. The quality of play in the MLS doesn't even come close to matching the play of the Premier League, Bundesliga, or La Liga. And when all of the elite soccer leagues are overseas, it becomes more difficult to stay in touch with the players or the game results, which can make it harder to follow those leagues. For many people in the US, the Premier League and La Liga house their favorite soccer teams. But even more Americans likely find it difficult to follow those leagues that play in the morning or early afternoon. Making the issue worse is that they can't watch those teams in person, unless the fans travel or those teams travel to the US. It's easy to record those matches on your TV or to wake up early to watch those matches on weekends. But when other Big Four sports games are tailored to the schedules of Americans and are on the most popular sports channels, soccer can easily fall behind. The Big Four sports are simply easier to follow and watch, both from a physical and television standpoint. It's not all bad news, though. TV viewership is definitely growing for MLS and the Premier League in the US, especially during the pandemic, as the MLS and Premier League were two of the first sports leagues across the world that figured out how to get their matches rescheduled safely. Viewership for certain Premier League games on NBC Sports here in America reached 1 million viewers, which is a record. And 7% of Americans now name soccer as their favorite sport, which trails baseball by just 2% now. The MLS also lags behind other soccer leagues and other sports leagues in part because they're missing that superstar component. Big Four sports leagues are superstar driven. The superstars help bring awareness to the sports and drive viewership for TV. For football, the media coverage is all about the stars and the teams that they play for. Plenty of media coverage is directed towards Brady, Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, and so on. Basketball is also incredibly star-focused. But the MLS is lacking in superstars. There have been some pretty successful attempts to bring in superstars to the MLS over the years, such as David Beckham in Los Angeles and Wayne Rooney in DC. And they've helped bring interest to the MLS. But the MLS still hasn't capitalized on all that success. People aren't watching the MLS in large numbers. Teams aren't bringing those superstars over from Europe in large numbers because they're too expensive and the superstars don't want to play here when they're in the prime of their careers. Why would anyone want to come here when they can make way more money and be way, way more famous in Europe. Having a strong professional soccer league on our own soil, with some superstars to keep people interested, would go a long way towards building that passion for soccer outside of the World Cup or the Olympic years. People simply don't care enough about soccer outside of those events, which hinders the potential for growth in the United States. The strangest part of the soccer culture here, in my opinion, is that there is no shortage of youth soccer players, yet the popularity doesn't carry over into a professional career. Soccer has the fourth highest amount of participants among kids aged 6 to 12 in the United States. Over 2 million kids play soccer during these ages. Clearly, parents want their kids to play soccer at these ages. But they don't continue playing in large quantities after they turn 12. Kids start to switch to other sports that are just more popular here, like baseball, basketball, and football. The struggle to build a respectable soccer culture in the US is a curious one. There's plenty of youth participation in the sport, but the lack of superstars at the professional level and the relative difficulty of watching quality soccer makes it hard to grow interest in the sport overall and keep people interested in watching and playing soccer past their youth. In order to learn more about the pay-to-play system, we're going to look at it from the perspective of a young player as he navigates the waters of competitive youth soccer here in the United States. It's important to note that competitive youth soccer, otherwise known as club soccer, is different than simply playing soccer for the recreational aspect of the sport. The competitive soccer world consists of kids that have aspirations of an athletic college scholarship or that think they may want to play soccer at the highest levels, which directly affects the quality of the U.S. national team. So let's start with the basics. Jimmy is a young, talented player who is entering the club soccer atmosphere after playing in the youth soccer leagues and not feeling challenged enough. First, Jimmy has to buy some new equipment to match his quest for a competitive soccer team. His parents are going to have to buy some new cleats, some new socks, and a pair of shin guards for him. Now that he has some real equipment, Jimmy and his parents are going to need to find a team for him to play on. Once he tries out for a few clubs and gets a few offers, Jimmy's parents are going to have to pay membership fees to join that club. Club fees range from about $1,500 to even $5,000 or higher, so we're going to say it's going to cost roughly $3,000. This covers paying the club's coaches, field rental fees, uniforms, registration fees, and insurance costs, among other things. So right now we're sitting at roughly $3,100. Not bad, right? Well, before you say that, we have to add in the cost of travel and gas. Club soccer teams often play in tournaments across the state or even across the country, depending on where those soccer teams are located. In fact, in order to get noticed by scouts, for colleges, and for professional teams, players need to be at these elite tournaments. So it's not really an option for a high-level team to simply miss these tournaments, and it's not an option for the player to miss these tournaments either. In addition, you will very rarely see many tournaments in your local area. So if the team plays in 5 to 6 tournaments a year, including ones that require traveling out of state, Jimmy's parents are going to have to shell out at least $1,500 between hotel rooms, gas, and food at these weekend tournaments. We'll add a conservative $1,500 to the total. So right now we're looking at a total of $4,600 if we take the lower end of most estimates about rooms, gas, food, and other costs. Jimmy would even be one of the luckier ones though. Some families are paying at least double that price. One family even paid roughly $8,000 in just their club membership fees. It's also interesting to note that this doesn't include extra training coaches, summer camps, and other additional payments. The base cost for participation that we estimated is about $4,600, but for many parents of athletes, if they want their kids to improve quicker and develop into better players, they will have to spend far more than this. For a game that's supposed to be one of the cheapest and most accessible games across the world, club soccer in the US is becoming unaffordable for many families. And that's the big problem. Not many people can afford to take $5,000 out of their budget to pay for all of this and more. And this isn't okay at all. But what makes the system look even worse here in the US is that the clubs in Europe pay for nearly all of these expenses for their athletes. Families of all socioeconomic backgrounds in Europe are free of the financial commitment for their young athletes. The European clubs recruit very young, before kids are even 10 years old, but they still pay for most of that process from the time they recruit those kids to when they come of age to play for the club's professional teams. And the clubs that decide that those kids are no longer part of their long-term professional plans ask them to leave, but the parents still didn't have to pay a cent for their kids to play up to that point. These European clubs also spend on player development coaches, uniforms, and all of the other stuff that parents have to pay for here in the United States. So to sum it all up, it is prohibitively expensive to play competitive soccer in the United States. Because it costs so much to play, club soccer is closed off to people who can't afford all of these expenses, which means that the US is missing out on a whole group of talented soccer players. The American system is what athletes and experts mean when they talk about the pay-to-play system. The European system is the exact opposite of this. European professional clubs have scouts that search out all of Europe to discover athletes with talent from all socioeconomic backgrounds. The clubs pay for the development, they pay for the competition, and so on. To be fair though, in the US, there is economic aid offered to athletes that can't afford club membership fees. This economic aid helps them get into tournaments and clubs that they may or may not have been able to get into before. The problem is, the aid is very rarely 100% of the cost associated with playing for the club. So it's essentially a discount on an already expensive package. And if you can't afford to pay for club membership, it's hard to also pay for additional development coaches, skills coaches, and travel expenses that help you become the best player you can be. So it's not really much of an advantage to get that economic aid. The final main issue I want to address today is the system that players are put into once they get into the clubs. It's the player development system within the club system, which clearly isn't confusing at all. Not only is the club system prohibitively expensive, but players aren't selected based on the proper skills for soccer success. This isn't true of all clubs, but there are so many clubs using these problematic practices that it hurts the US team at the top regardless. So, coaches get paid and keep their jobs by winning. Winning is the number one most important thing for any club. Which makes sense, right? You want the best teams in the region because it gives your club prestige and it attracts more people that want to try out for your club. So winning should be a primary focus for any team. The problem with focusing only on winning or primarily on winning is that it rewards the players who are good right this very second. Which makes sense too. If you're trying to win, you want the people that can help you win now. But the problem is that makes for very lousy player development. The best players can't develop if they don't play at all. Rewarding the best players at one moment in time, for example, the strongest or the fastest players, helps you in the short term, but it pushes away the players who will be superstars when they turn 18 or can develop into better players later in their soccer careers. Those kids that sit on the bench or that don't make the team because of their physical attributes like size and speed are still skilled and could have a higher potential than kids who may make the team and start. Soccer doesn't require as much athleticism as other sports, so the size and the speed requirements are fine. But the crux of the issue is that on-ball skills are far more important to the overall quality of the player and the team. Soccer requires technical skills and on-ball talent, mostly, which are things that can be taught. But if people don't have the opportunity to learn those on-ball skills, then they won't improve, and you're stuck with the kids who never learned how to control the ball. And that's part of the problem. The club system and the national team are at direct odds in this scenario. The national team wants the best players when they turn 18. The club team wants the best players at each age level, which often don't overlap because people develop at different speeds. So in conclusion, we've got a weak soccer culture that has more supporters for overseas teams than American teams, and more supporters for foreign players than American players. We've got a system that rewards families who have more money and the willingness to spend lots of money on improvement. And finally, we've got a club system that rewards winning at the expense of developing players into their best selves. Add them all together, and there is no wonder this American soccer system is broken. So how do we fix it? We look to Europe. We start building a system that supports people of all socioeconomic backgrounds. We reward players who show promise but don't have the athletic abilities of kids their age, because ball skills are more important than speed or size. US soccer needs to put the onus on the MLS to build a system that keeps American players in American leagues and then turns them into superstars. Hopefully, by following this system, or the blueprint for this system, we reduce the amount of money required for parents to spend to make their children's dreams come true and improve the American soccer product at the exact same time. If you enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments section. Drop a like and don't forget to subscribe down below. Thanks for listening, and I'll see everyone next time on Highly Technical Sports.